So today we're going to be talking about meal planning in relation to intermittent fasting. So a, a really good strategy to take. So the first meal that we have after our fasting window, it's quite important to select this properly and to have it pre-planned, have it pre-organized to know what you're going to have. The beauty is with fasting is that you're skipping a meal essentially. So that means it's one less meal that you really have to organize. So you should be able to have a little bit of extra time to pre-plan the meal that you do have for the first time. So I recommend having a small high protein, good fat pre-snack before your meal. So that might just be like sometimes I'll do a small handful of nuts and a little bit of coconut oil, and I'll eat that together. And that just will sort of settle the hunger signals down. Sometimes you can get very ravenously hungry after a fasting window, and you can have the tendency to overconsume, especially if it's a really long fasting window. So trying that, playing around and doing that pre-snack, maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes before your main meal can be a really good strategy to blunten that hunger effect, so you're not as ravenously hungry. We need to make sure that that first meal is a quality meal with good nutrition. Because we've skipped a meal essentially, we need to make sure that we're getting maximum nutrition in the meal. So we want to have good quality foods when we are eating. Low carb, if you have something that's lower carb, so non-starchy, non-processed carbs, no sugar, sweetness, stuff like that, it will actually help to extend the insulin benefits. So remember with fasting, when we're fasting, we're not releasing any insulin. And that's the whole benefit, because insulin is that fat storage hormone. So if we have a low carb meal, we actually maximize the fat burning effects, and we almost extend the benefits of the fast even longer. So I highly recommend to keep it a low carb meal. And make sure to have some sort of protein source. If we go too long without eating, we can start to lose muscle mass. So it's important to have some sort of protein source in there. Some sort of major protein source, like, maybe some meat or chicken or, eggs or something like that, to minimize the effects of losing of muscle loss and just to rebuild, the protein and tissues. Eating window for meal spacing. So there's a few different ways that you can do it. It depends on how long your eating window is. So say for instance, if you're doing a 16-8, so you've got 8 hours, some people like to just have 2 meals in that time. Some people like to do 2 meals with a snack in between, or maybe a pre-snack before the first meal. Or you can even do 3 smaller meals. You probably wouldn't have 3 big heavy meals because you don't want to feel like you're trying to cram it in that small amount of time. And make sure, again, to have some sort of protein source with each of those meals. And of course, keeping the foods nutrient dense, because that's the name of the game. We want to have the maximal amount of nutrients that we can get for our body with the minimal calorie spend. So lots of veggies, non-starchy veggies in particular. And meal considerations, as I just mentioned, we want to make sure that we have nutrient-dense foods to account for the fact that we're probably going to be having less calories than if we were eating that extra meal. We want to avoid anything that's got, empty calories for sure, especially if we're trying to lose body fat and want to maximize the body fat burning effects of the fast. We want to avoid overeating or undereating. Okay, not eating enough is going to have an effect on the metabolism in a negative way. Your body will feel like it needs to conserve energy, and it will slow the metabolic rate that it's burning everything. And of course, overeating is going to, it's going to undo the effects of putting you in a calorie deficit. and adjust the meal size based on the time window. Okay, so the window of your fasting, the window of your eating. If you've got a smaller eating window, then yeah, adjust how many meals. You don't want to be stuffing yourself full just because you think you have to. Do what feels intuitively good for you. And certainly, like a rule that I always like to go by is eat until you're 80% full and leave 20% for digestion. So if you overeat and you really stuff yourself, digestion doesn't even happen properly because you're just so stuffed full of food that it can barely move through your digestive system, and it's not a beneficial thing to be able to absorb nutrients and things like that. So definitely take a look at how long you're fasting, play around with it depending on how it feels for you. You certainly don't want to be eating too much in that time, but also not eating under eating. So find the healthy balance that works for you. As always with everything, especially with intermittent fasting, it's an individualized thing. So you've got to listen to your body and work out what works best for you.